Alright, I wanted to make a video on steering dampers because this is something I think a lot of people don't know. It's a term that's thrown across every tank slapper slash death wobble slash speed wobble slash headshake video. Most people don't realize how rare they actually are on bikes, and they just assume that they have one. Or I've even seen this as justification for why they bought a bike that was way stronger, way faster than what they really should have started with, is because it came stock with a steering damper and that makes them safer. So, what is a steering damper? We're going to go over that first. A steering damper is so you can't really see it, but on this bike, right here is the steering damper. Hopefully that's showing on the camera. So the steering damper, there's two versions of it. A steering damper is either mechanical or it's electric. But just for all reasons that matter, just assume that they function the same. A steering damper is going to be, in essence, it's a tube in a tube, and it's going to, this is very simplified, tube in a tube, and the pressure, it regulates the fluid exchange between these tubes, okay? So, moving my handlebars is going to push fluid into the other tube, and then when I push it this way, it's going to push liquid into the other tube, right? Electric steering dampers, the way that they change this is it's going to be the size of the hole, right? So the smaller the hole, the more force it takes to push the handlebars. The slower you're going, the more it opens up, the easier it is to move the handlebars. A mechanical steering damper is going to be a fixed rate, right? So no matter how fast you're going, no matter how slow you're going, it's going to slow down the bars because there is that fluid friction that you have to get past within those two rods, okay? But better way to think of a steering damper and its function is think of a steering damper, corn starch and water, right? You know, the oobleck. Think of that as their function. Think of that as you basically just have a tube on the front of your bike filled with corn starch and water. That's how it works. That's all it's doing. So if you jab it, right, if the bar jabs, that corn starch and water will stiffen up, right? So it will not let you move too much quicker. Same thing, corn starch and water. If you go punch it, it hardens up, but it hardens up, but there's still some give, right? There's still some flex. Exact same function. So how that works is with a tank slapper, what happens is you are going, and let's say that front wheel comes up, you hit a bump, your suspension gets unsettled, the bar goes like this, okay? So goes like that. That steering damper is going to prevent it from going from here to here. It's going to make it go from here to here because the cornstarch water oobleck stiffens up due to that quick input, right? That's how it's functioning. Now, do you need one on your bike? How relevant is this to you in your riding? Tank slappers and whatever I call it through this video, because I'm probably just going to keep saying different things. Tank slappers are much more rare than you think they are, okay? There's so many videos online, there's so many things, but you have to understand a tank slapper is not just your wheel coming up, being a little offset, coming down, and then it's going to guarantee that it goes like this. And every bike is different, the geometry is different, but realistically, if your suspension on your bike is not completely shot, it's going to be very hard to pull this off. Now, headshake, right, is the lesser version. That's more easy to pull off. And you may have experienced this and never even realized it, but it's because your suspension on your bike is doing what it's supposed to. Right? You're going, you accidentally hit throttle too hard, you accidentally go over a bump too hard, something, you come down and your front just feels a little light, right? You know that tire's on the ground, you know you're slowing down, but that front, you just don't have the traction and it feels a little lighter. That's headshake. That is the precursor to a tank slapper, okay? Why it doesn't go into that? Because a tank slapper, and you would not believe how deep this rabbit hole goes, and this used to be a highly, like if you're a big forum nerd and you really want to go through, tank slappers are caused by oscillation in the bars. Basically, it's a frequency, right? It has to hit the perfect frequency, and this is where your suspension being shot will cause it, is because the actual springs, the fluid in the suspension and everything it's doing this perfect shimmy where it gets worse and worse and worse. If your seals aren't blown, if your suspension fluid's not 12 years old, you're probably fine. But that's how it works. That's a steering damper. Think of a steering damper as it's a tube connected to your steering, and it's filled with cornstarch and water, and quick inputs will stiffen it up. And the faster you go, okay, the faster you go, the harder it is to push on those bars, because the bike is just, it's basically, and this is of course a very dumb idea, but it's vibrating that cornstarch, it's making it stiffer, so it takes more effort to turn the bars. Now, here's the downside to steering dampers. Steering dampers make bike steering much, much, much stiffer. Much stiffer. Way stiffer, okay? This bike has a steering damper. If you have bought a 1000 in the past 10 years, it comes with a steering damper. This is twofold. It makes it where when you are on the interstate, when you are just ripping it, if you're accelerating very hard, it is going to feel very planted. That is one, and it's not what if you've never, depending on what you come from, you've probably assumed that sport bikes feel so planted because of the fancier suspension, which is true, because of the fairings, which is kind of true, because of the seating position, which is not really true. It's that steering damper that's making you feel so rock solid steady on the road. It's why when you hit a bump at 100 miles per hour, you feel still so locked into that bike, and it feels like nothing crazy's happened. It's a combination of suspension and that steering damper preventing that bar from doing any sudden movements, no matter how inaccurate your steering / whatever inputs are. Now, where does this become a negative? Most of them now they're all electronic, so the actual steering damper is open, right? So it is effectively a non-steering dampened bike when you are cruising at slow speeds. Some of them are still worse about this than others. The R1 steering is very, very good down low. So with it slow, right, the tube is completely open and there is no hindrance in turning. The slow speed on this thing feels like no problem at all. If you are buying a bike and you decide that you want to add a steering damper onto it, you're going to be buying a mechanical steering damper, which is going to be a fixed rate of flow through that hole / a fixed stiffness of that cornstarch and water, so to speak, okay? So at slow speeds, it's still going to take significantly more force to push those bars. And I mean significantly more force to push those bars. If you get on a true, and some people, I don't know why, but, and I think it's because they don't understand, but steering dampers, the mechanical ones are adjustable, and they'll crank these things up. And going through a parking lot, right, it feels like you are fighting against the world to turn this thing. For slow speed maneuvers, it will slow down the turn speed of the bike so much it legitimately becomes impossible to do slow speeds. Legitimately impossible, because you cannot adjust as quickly. Now, where is all of this relevant to you and tank slappers and avoiding them? You probably don't have a steering damper on your bike. Okay? Despite what every single comment online seems to allude to, how common it is for these videos to tell you that steering dampers, you see the tank slapper, oh, he should have had a steering damper, steering damper would have prevented this. And also sometimes steering damper is the correct term. You'll also hear steering dampener, whatever, just so if you see that. Steering dampers do not come stock on the majority of bikes, okay? They're actually very, very rare. The only bikes that come with them are the 1000s, some of the 600s, I believe all the modern 600s now. I think the R6 came with one as well. I believe it may have been mechanical, but I believe it came with a steering damper. The MT10, I believe the KTM, the 1290 Duke definitely would. I want to say the 890 did / 990 does. That's about it though. That's about it. So, with how often you see these talked about online, how often people tell you the steering damper would have prevented that, you need a steering damper, this is why I added a steering damper to my bike. Why do so many bikes, the R9 doesn't come with a steering damper, right? The R7 doesn't come with a steering damper. The MT09 doesn't come with a steering damper. The MT07 doesn't come with a steering damper. Almost none of the nakeds come with a steering damper. The Z900 might, the GSX S1000 might. I'm just thinking too. Anyway, the majority of bikes do not come with a steering damper. And why is that? Right? If you so commonly see online that a steering damper is the difference between you going down the road and becoming the next viral, bump, 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 bam, right into the guardrail, for what's effectively, it's about $1,000. Steering dampers are pretty cheap. Just a mechanical one is not a fancy, crazy add-on by any means. It's because they're not necessary. It's because they're not as useful and as purposeful as a lot of people are led to believe. Okay? Take that in for a second. A steering damper is not going to be as useful as you think it is. Okay? So if you have come across these and you're seeing these videos and you really want an R9, but you're scared because you realize, oh shit, it doesn't come with a steering damper. That's crazy. How does, it's guaranteed to be a tank slapper. Not true. The geometry of a bike and the actual cause of a tank slapper is much, much more complex than just wheel came down a little crooked. Okay? And for an example, my 390 Duke, just naked bike, no steering damper. If that wheel was up and I came down like this, you could not make that bike wobble. You couldn't. I couldn't if I tried to make that bike go into a wobble. It's not like it was a fancy bike by any means. It's not like it was they spent a crazy amount of R&D making this the perfect naked for, stupid hooligan shit and also high speed or whatever, right? It was, it's a $5,000 bike. It's nothing fancy at all, but it would not do it. This R1, you could not pay me to ride without a steering damper. This thing has, it's most likely the geometry, and it may just be because I'm too fat for this bike, but it is very easy to get headshake on this bike. Without that steering damper, I would never ride this bike. I would never, ever ride this bike. My Gixxer, steering damper wasn't needed. I could have taken that steering damper off and it probably would have made it a better bike, honestly, because it just wasn't necessary. I never at any point had any sort of instability with that bike. Now, granted, maybe the steering damper was so incredible and it was more of a hindrance than it was a positive, but that bike's geometry did not lend itself to any sort of light front-endedness. Even with a wheelie, right? When you came down, that wheel was down. There was no head shake. There was no wobble. There was never any sort of disruption in that front suspension. It's also one of the reasons that I always talk about the Gixxer suspension stock is incredible. Anyway, downsides of a steering damper are that it makes you have to use way more force when you are going at speed to turn. This is where some of the playfulness of the MT-09, the MT-07, the R7, the R9 is going to fall into this as well if I could ever find one to ride. I don't know why I keep listing off the Yamahas. The CBR 650. The bikes that are known as more playful, why some of these, the 600s and 1000s can be labeled as more serious feeling bikes, is because at speed, the amount of force it takes for me to turn a bike with a steering damper is 2 to 3x what it is a bike without one. A lot of people do not like steering dampers at all because of how, and even if you don't consciously know this, because they don't, it's very weird to me, most of these companies don't even advertise on their page that it comes with a steering damper, right? This used to be a big deal, as people hated steering dampers and they thought they were stupid, or they would immediately replace them with the mechanical Öhlins, and they would basically back it out to where it was the lowest setting possible, and it, whatever. Steering dampers are not what you think they are. They are only being functional past a certain speed. It is that corn starch and water effect on the steering. It is going to make it much stiffer to turn. It is going to make it much, 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 much harder to turn quickly in different directions, right? Because of that corn starch effect. So if I'm on the interstate and I smash this bar forward and then I smash this bar forward, it takes some force. It's not like if you're on an MT-07 where you feel like you can just dance between where you're going. It takes some force, and there's some delay to it because of that steering damper, because of that corn starch and water effect. Okay, that's not relevant to track because you're going forward and then you're going left and then you're coming up and then you're going right. These are big wide sweeping turns. You're not going back, forth, back, forth. For supermoto, you're never going to see one because you're going to be making very short, quick, boop, 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 right? Steering dampers on dirt bikes are rare, but they go through ebbs and flows. Honda used to come with some steering dampers on theirs stock. I believe it was the 450s. And they got rid of them because people didn't like it because they made the steering too stiff. But a lot of the guys that do the crazy fast, trail riding, they'll throw steering dampers on their bike, but they're mechanical. Anyway, that's how a steering damper works. Hopefully that'll give you a little better idea of what a steering damper is, because I know you've seen that term 1,000 times and you've probably never actually looked it up or verified what has what, does it come with one, whatever. And just to make you feel a little better about your bike not having one, there's a lot of pros to not having a steering damper, okay? A lot of pros. Cons are the higher risk, but that risk is not as high as you think it is, okay? And just to throw in as a final little addendum, steering damper does not completely prevent a tank slapper. Does not completely prevent them. Makes it way less likely. However, not going to prevent them fully. If your suspension is shot on your bike, if you've shot the fork seals, if your fluid is a bajillion years old and sits like shit, it's gonna slow it down, but it can still happen. Okay, steering dampers aren't magic. Steering dampers aren't some perfect fix-all, no drawback, wonderful addition to your bike that's worth immediately spending $1,000, $2,000 extra dollars on the Olins. Steering dampers are a extra piece of suspension that's added into steering on very powerful bikes as a way to make them safer and really to feel more up front with that front tire. It's going to prevent the head shake. It's going to make it easier to ride if you're really riding it hard, because it will not let that front wheel get too crazy and light and then boom, you're gone. Okay. Hope this helps. I hope this is a better description than you may have seen, and hopefully this rain goes away sooner than later. Thank you.